I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the most superintelligent force of love and creation at the highest levels of vibrational frequency forever. What is happening, Benton here? Peace and love to Joe Moore. Shout out to what used to be the chat. There is no live chat. We have 2 likes and 1 viewing. Hey, that's okay. I like that ratio. Which makes me think about the demise of this channel, whatever that would represent. I have a few notes I would like to get into, but certainly my honor and privilege to address whoever still chooses to listen to whatever it is that I'm on about these days. So thank you. Much appreciated. It's funny because I've been listening to this show, Who Are These Podcasts? And they go in on this stuttering John Melendez, who was one of the characters from the old Howard Stern show, and is now this high level lolcow, or has been for many years. And they found a treasure trove of old clips. And who are these podcasts? They do what's called A-logging. They A-log John and this Aaron M. Holt from Steel Toe Morning Show and others. And listening to that, John had been on this show, the Stephanie Miller Show. She was a WNBA player who had retired. And I believe I used to hear her on ESPN radio to some extent. I know the name is familiar. Not bad for a lady in sports, from what I recall, but this was not a sports show. And it's funny just geopolitically, because this would have been, I don't know what year, long time ago, 10, 15 years ago, maybe longer. Early days of, 2015, let's say 10 years ago, it was a podcast. And John got hired to run the board, and, he oversold himself at the level of his qualifications, having formerly been on the biggest radio show ever, Howard Stern, and then, one of the biggest late night shows, this night show, maybe the biggest, I don't know. So he was able to get this job, and at a certain point, apparently it's supposed to be a politically themed show that John was pretending like he knew something about politics at the time. And it was funny because it was mentioned in passing by Stephanie Miller, Turkey. What I want to talk about is, because John was, telling stories about his life. And she's like, well, what I want to talk about is Turkey shot down a Russian plane. Right. And so to realize that, 10 years ago, or whenever this happened, the 24-hour news cycle, would have had people in, fear states, trepidation, worry. Oh my goodness, is it about to go down? Right? Is this shit about to hit the fan? World War III, danger, Will Robinson. To listen to this 10 years later or more, and oh yeah, that's right, another nothing burger in a long line of nothing burgers. Nothing to see here. And it's one of the reasons I screenshot so many things over time on my phone, or when I used to have a tablet or a desktop computer, is to find it later on, years later, and to go back through just how ridiculous what the system promotes is outside of the context of the present. Whatever is whatever hysterias are being whipped up, in the moment. So one of which is this Klaus Schwab, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And then over a period of years, the general public, taking the download or uptaking that idea. And again, it's a mockery of the system from my perspective, especially as Americans, indoctrinated about this American dream, external American dream, lest we forget, hard work, externally go out here and bust one's ass to make rich people richer. That alone is a reason not to have a job in my world these days. Is okay. What job is available that won't pay for what the federal government is doing and won't pay for rich people to be richer, right? What job would that be? And well, I don't know, perhaps street vendor. Okay, I don't know. Are they making rich people richer? Maybe not directly, right? And I'm not going into street vending. Well, it would be kind of hilarious, the Mr. Peanut of ICE, as I'm treated at times, setting up next to the Latinos and street vending. That would be funny, without speaking Spanish. The turf wars of the street vending, hilarious. And so this Klaus Schwab, you will own nothing and you will be happy. I tie that into this idea of work hard, live below one's means to later on experience relative affluence. Well, what does that look like? The white picket fence, the Ozzie and Harriet, right? The Leave It to Beaver, mom, dad, and that's changed to some extent, but historically, the so-called nuclear family, right? Pay off the house, have a retirement, mow the yard, send the kids to college, all that type shit, right? And a lot of that is tied up in purchases, property, right? Consumption, and the consuming is going to continue, certainly. And as we see the switch to subscription services. So why so much switch to subscription services? Well, shout out to that little feller, Mike Andes, from Augusta National Lawn Mowing, who's taught me that, anything that's a recurring subscription increases the enterprise value of the corporation. So that's why you will own nothing and be happy, because capitalism and economics must continue to grow. It has to continue to grow. Same thing with the population. As much as the system talks about, a potential for a future overpopulated realm, vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, seems to me like the enemy will pack these folks in as, nuts to butts, as much as suits the system. So the system promoting ideas around depopulation and, there's too many of these so-called useless eaters, right? Well, again, that's contextual from the perspective of the system, okay? Which again, the system existing, via delusion, and that delusion existing to the purpose of the delusion is set up in opposition to what I am. Again, not Benton the personality, not Benton, the characteristics or the history, the biography, the performer performing, not those things, not the psychology, the core, true, real essence of the being, the so-called real thing, or actually remove so-called the real thing. And then, reconciling via the philosophy of solipsism, are other individuals the same as what I know myself to be via the recent unlocking of the achievement within the game of lies of true knowledge of self/self-realization? And would not a game of lies do everything possible to preclude or prevent the individual who was, in my view, to my knowing, born as a baby in a state of spiritual perfection, only to be taught via Moloch's machine to forget that, or to never truly discover that, as a more conscious, aware being? I sort of got lost in my own sauce there. My apologies, but seemed to be a somewhat eloquent description for a while. And tying that back in, so the notion of the system would be, as the child is reared and raised up through these systems, through Moloch's machine systems, brainwashed, mind controlled, psychologically enslaved, to not, even if the person or the individual has the same essence of what I know myself to be, to not ever fully become aware of that knowledge, to not to have forgotten what is true in actual reality. And again, this world can never be actual reality because of elements of waking dreams, surrealism, and unreality. That those dreamlike, that's always there to some degree. Uh, it's there. It's ever present. It's not. It's simply never true reality as far as, you know, the insertion into what some would call a matrix. It proves itself to be unreal. It shows itself at the level of waking dream elements and surrealistic elements, and the system is doing that, right? The vacuous delusory adversarial realm of transactions is doing that. It would be doing it whether Benton had brought his little light, this little light of Benton's here. It would still be happening. And that's where the spiritual attacks and the internalization versus the externalization, that's where they fall short from the propagandists and the defenders of Moloch's machines. That's where that all falls short, is when an individual such as myself is unwilling to internalize those attacks. The validity only exists at the level of a so-called free will, whereby some Eleanor Roosevelt notion of nobody can, more or less nobody can make me feel bad without my permission. So it's to acquiesce or to tacitly consent to internalizing those spiritual attacks. So even as I say these words, understanding that they will be twisted and turned as potential weapons against Benton and Benton the performer in the context of the performance, that's one thing. But then recognizing that the performer also has access to this proper identification with what the performer knows his true core essence to be, which is one with the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, a quickening spirit, and thereby is able to vibrate quicker and to not be in the place that the weapons were aimed at when they were fired, if that makes sense. This is a big part of that is and it's also a big part of doing what is right and honorable at the level of integrity, is to simply not allow those attacks, meaning to hear the jeers, to hear the ridicule, to hear the mockery, and to simply say, well, that does not apply to what I am. Or even further, to understand, oh, the mockery and the ridicule is because of what this place knows I am. This place knows what I am. That's the reason for the mockery and the ridicule, because otherwise, the idea of a fellow broadcasting from Los Angeles from the back seat of a Nissan Versa parked on the street at 5 a.m, that's ridiculous enough, right? That sort of mocks itself in the context of, again, property. Okay, go out and earn an income, build oneself into something in this world, make something of oneself, go out into the world, make it your bitch in some way at the level of aggression, assertion, and dominance through the Yang form, right? Never retreat, never surrender. Go out there and achieve and produce for society. Do all of those things, okay? And to define oneself thereby in relation to a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. What a trap, what an undertaking. Imagine having all of that explained at the level of truth. Imagine having all of that explained at the level of truth by, I don't know, so-called authority figures, perhaps one's parents, maybe, I don't know, age of 12 or so, perhaps 12, 13 years old. And then, what if the parents understood that, sat the child or children down, explained it to them, and then, okay, and this is what's expected of you, little Johnny, little Susie, that you're going to go out into this world. You're going to define yourself based on this realm with its elements of waking dreams, surrealism, unreality. You're going to go try to, start your own business or climb a corporate ladder. And every single day, amongst those elements of waking dreams, surrealism, unreality, the absurdities, that manifest in the realm, probably because whatever antithesis is seemingly is comedic and enjoys mocking and ridiculing the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency. Okay. Certainly antithesis lacking, or the enemy or so-called Satan lacking the ability to be joyful and rejoice in, the victory that the most super intelligent force of love and creation represents, the supreme authority, the supreme victory, right? Beyond any possibility of defeat, knowing not defeat, right? Knowing nothing of negative states of being, and then realizing that this world is predicated upon the designs and machinations of the inverse of all of that. And it performs this, through the psychological enslavement whereby individuals are expected and taught, okay, now go, we've raised you to the majority age. Now go out here and seek your fulfillment and happiness by defining oneself in relation to a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. Imagine fully explaining those truths, right? Or at least, half truths. Again, back to the Kybalion, all truths are merely half truths. Either way, imagine knowing that, raising children, never telling them bits and pieces here and there, right? Maybe for some plausible deniability, but never fully, giving the child the proper instruction and say, okay, now off you go to figure it out, right? And then how quickly is a child going to be, wow, why was this done to me? Like, what is this? In fact, the people who did this to me and brought me to this place, right, because they wanted to get it on at some point, or maybe even their own egos and their own view of themselves, sort of necessitates having children. The reality is, in this place, most people find it very difficult to swim upstream or go their own way, right? As much as Gen X being blasted with these notions around you're a unique individual, non-conformity as some sort of ethos, and then in the present lexicon, it's I recognized years ago, conformity is the new non-conformity. In fact, what I observe from the vast majority of all humans is they do whatever the other humans are doing, no matter what that is. So almost all of the other humans are either having children or attempting to have children on some level. At least I understand that's starting to change to some extent, and it has changed to some extent over the decades. I get that. But broadly speaking, such as, Benton here, the only person in both sides of his family, no children, right? No children. And just so how unusual that is. And I understand this thing around, well, it's women who actually have the genetic offspring, and it's, half of all men or whatever don't, whatever that statistic is. That's not what I'm talking about. Still, it's much of society, at least, seems to believe that they have children, right? And, so maybe their own inability to just not do the thing that everybody else is doing. Right. And, it doesn't even matter. I almost got into a thing about myself. Let's not do that. So why not tell them the full truth? And that proves that parents are in on it, because there has to be some parents that know some versions of what I'm talking about. Maybe not the whole enchilada, but what is the expectation for the child who's, now a teenager and then is on the precipice of adulthood? It's 100%. You must go into this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions as an adult, and you must define yourself in relation to this place. You must do this. Why? Because that's what serves it. And what it is doing is important above all. What it is doing from its perspective is holy, right? Or damned, which is probably the same thing, the inverse of holy, right? Treated as if it were sacrosanct. Oh, you must produce. You must work hard, right? You must do these things without ever examining, okay, what would happen if the individual was taught, hey, this is exactly what it is. Because I've met people like this. There's not many people. I've met people who were raised some version of what I'm describing. They're rare, they're hard to find. I've met a couple, right? And it's a completely different flavor of human being, right? Perhaps it's more akin to what humans could be or were designed to be if they were designed. Um, this certainly no loving heavenly Father designed this place and designed humanity to, with all perfect knowledge, omniscience, beyond time and space, such that, all of us silly little humans could be here in 2025, enjoying being ruled over by people who hire clowns like Klaus Schwab to mock and ridicule and to say, well, you will own nothing and you will be happy, and as Alex Jones pointed out, appearing as a literal Bond villain, right? And I shouldn't say literal, a figurative, someone who could walk onto a James Bond movie set and plausibly be a James Bond villain, accent and all, right? Klaus Schwab. And then it sounds so ridiculous. So imagine spending, well, we don't have to imagine, but so the being having spent their whole life now, I myself will be 50, Benton 50, turning 50 this month. Happy birthday to Benton. Growing up in this, dogged pursuit of Federal Reserve notes. And everybody has this notion of, well, it's to invest, it's to save, it's to pay one's bills, blah, blah, blah. No, it's to consume. It's to involve oneself with branding. It's to involve oneself with keeping up with the Joneses. It's to involve oneself in putting forth a particular graven image on social media, to uphold before Moloch, to get the little pat on the head. Is this good enough, Moloch? Right. All of these various things. And so sort of the whiplash and just how ridiculous it sounds. Okay, well, now one of these supposedly, high powered so-called elites is up there with his accent and appearing as a Bond villain, telling us that we will own nothing and we will be happy. Well, it sounds so far-fetched and ridiculous. It's laughable. Well, that's never going to happen. Right. Meanwhile, sort of the gallows humor of especially the people who believe themselves to be MAGA or traditional family values Christians, whatever that even is, it seemingly is so ridiculous that it won't actually come to pass. And then the idea of, well, it's in the future, it appears to be happening, it hasn't fully fomented yet. So then there's still time to procrastinate because maybe someone or something may swoop in and fix it before it actually happens. Right. You will own nothing and you will be happy. And folks have ran with this idea, certainly. And it's probably exactly what it sounds, in the long run. And then why don't individuals examine that notion? And what I see is when I see it in the YouTube comments, when I hear other people quoting Mr. Schwab, it's from a person who's accepting it at a face value, at a surface level, and then is sort of repeating it within a peer group of a so-called truth community where, sort of everyone has heard the concept and has been down various rabbit holes, but it's just sort of a joke in a way. It's like a trope. Well, why not? What was the point of being given a human consciousness, a human mind, human intelligence, if not to spend time with some of these concepts? To say, well, that's interesting. It seems to mean one thing on the surface level, is there a deeper meaning to be gleaned here? And then how do I glean that deeper meaning if that is in fact available? How is that done? And to really try to understand and comprehend what does the concept mean. And then the damage around, being raised and indoctrinated in one vein, VEIN, and then, being the system saying, well, it's going to be this other thing now. Now you're just going to do whatever your job is. You're going to get whatever credits the system gives you. And then, the money that you have access to, the currency, right? That's all. That's what will enable the accessing of various services. And then it's also the idea of like the IoT, the Internet of Things, it's sort of the idea of the refrigerator being online. And then, now And this is what Alex Jones was talking about 15 years ago, and it seemed ridiculous back then. And I was mocked and ridiculed back then by many people who, or just dumbfounded faces when I tried to tell people, when I was foolish enough to try to tell people in my real life about these things or talk about it online, and just, oh, well, you're one of those tinfoil hat people. Okay. Yeah, sure, my smart TV's watching me and reporting to the government and the powers that be. Okay. Well, of course it was the entire time. Of course it was. But so that all of this is a monthly fee, you know. Um, and then the reality that, how many of these devices are going to be serviceable in the future, and then how many are going to be user serviceable, and then how many, so at what point do the economics necessitate just, yeah, the person has paid to have a refrigerator over time. And there's some portion of their monthly credits goes to pay their refrigerator subscription. And when it needs servicing, the system claims there is a warranty or there's some sort of service plan. And then, the repair robots will show up at a certain point when necessary, or eventually the refrigerator will be replaced. And then, looking at a movie like Terry Gilliam's Brazil, where Robert De Niro played this sort of vigilante technician, because the system was so inept and uncaring around actually showing up and repairing, whatever was going wrong in the main character's apartment in this movie. And then so eventually, and it shows, to comedic effect, even all of what was required to maneuver the bureaucracy of the system to even have two incompetent technicians show up at the apartment unannounced, just show up in the middle of the night, I believe it was. And then not only are they're not capable of fixing the problem, but they're experts in all of the directives, and, well, we can't do this until that's been done, and that's illegal, and this, you have to have this form filled out before we get here, and then just all of whatever that is. But then the technicians themselves are either incompetent or pretending to be incompetent, maybe to avoid work. But of course they go ahead and open up the wall panel and make things far worse while they're there. But it's played for comedy. It's like, no, this is the future in some way. And it is happening. It is coming to pass. And again, society, in fact, is maintained and operated in a perpetual state of collapse. The society's secret, back to the prior live stream, day before yesterday's, that is society's secret, or one of them. It's maintained in a perpetual state of collapse. But, oh, wait a minute, within the lifespan of the individual, oh, well, look, we have a period of time, the 1950s, right? The immediate World War II post, period, where it seemed like things were going great. Oh, the nuclear family is the answer. Is it? Because now many people are revisiting the concept of the nuclear family. They're saying, actually, it's extended families where it's at. Well, during the economic times of the boom, the post-war boom, well, that was the nuclear family because people could afford it. Maybe in the past, the economics dictated, multi-generational living within the domicile or the house. And thus, well, how can the system then make an industry and a business of elder care? If the elderly are all living with their extended family, well, how are nursing homes going to be a thing? Now, of course, there's exceptions. There's people who their families pass away, or some tragedy befalls, or they're just not able to get along with each other. But the corporation and the capitalism and society is structured to, it's based upon never-ending growth, and that's what I talked about earlier with the population. And a lot of this must occur at times through population growth. And then if the system wants to slow down the population growth, well, maybe now the AI and the technology can pull up, it can actually sort of step in to some extent, right, and at the level of efficiency. And also what we see is that, capitalism and economics is also forcing ever more efficiency. So this idea of going out, working hard, and performing for the system, right, to be productive. The fact is, what was expected of somebody at the level of going to a job and producing in 1960 is fucking child's play compared to what's expected in 2025, right? because even me at the age of 50, after these chronic illnesses and all of these things, I can still go to physical labor every day if I need to. Now, I probably can't do it 5 days in a row, 8 hours a day, but I could work up to that pretty quickly. Okay. What was going on in the workplace in 1960, far less arduous. Because why? Because statistics prove that the labor force was way less efficient in 1960 than it is today. So what we see is the system is now rewarding the toil of employment. If you look at what the money actually purchases, so this channel I've been listening to talking about at some point in the past, maybe around 1960, I don't remember the year, but that more or less, if you take the median hourly wage and then we say, okay, how much gold will 1 hour worked at the median hour wage buy? Well, back then, maybe, or even not even that far back, 1 hour of the median wage bought 0.06 ounces of gold. Now it buys 0.01 ounces of gold. Remember, the value of gold doesn't change. When they say gold's up or gold's down, actually, no, it's not. It's that the currency is up or down in relation to gold. Gold stays the same. That's the whole point of gold. It stays the same. Now, a gold expert would probably shoot down what I'm saying, but as an oversimplification, that's okay. That for our purposes, simplification works. So now so if I go into the workforce, I'm expected to perform the work way more efficiently than I would have been expected to perform it in 1960. Meanwhile, the system was rewarding me to a higher extent in 1960 than it is today. And that's the vestiges, is more goofing off, less worry about job security, so-called, right? Perhaps more employment options back then, and the median wage had a higher value in purchasing power. But now it's 65 years later, and it's still all the same notions around pull oneself up by one's bootstraps, go out here and hard work oneself into wealth, which isn't even possible. In fact, it's never happened in all of human history. Nobody's hard worked themselves into actual wealth. It's not possible. Okay, it's simply impossible. So now people are confused as to why Gen Z doesn't want to work. Well, part of how Gen Z is being tortured is to have the capacity, because of social media, because of the access to information. Gen Z has access to understanding what a bad deal it is to go out into a workplace where they are expected to toil and produce far beyond what they're being rewarded. When, if I build a time machine and go back to 1960, probably those folks were being rewarded more than they deserved. They probably, based on present day capitalism economics, they didn't deserve to be rewarded in those ways. They should have been working harder, right? Based on looking at what's going on today, right? Does that make sense? But then it's honored and venerated how hardworking the ancestors were. Oh, but were they? But were they? If a person was willing to show up and just do physical labor, they were rewarded with an amount of money that actually bought something at the time. And fast forward to now, it's simply not possible. Yeah, I'm able to sleep in a ditch and, go get some version of Mexican day labor. And I've done this. I've slept in a version of a ditch and then gotten Mexican day labor later that day. Right. And $100, $200, whatever that was, $150 after, one time famously dug a hole all day long in the rain. Right. Just dug a hole all day in the rain for $100 or whatever it was. Yeah, been there, done that. There's no honor in that. That's not to be venerated. That's not to be, wow, he's such a great, productive, efficient worker out there digging. Look at him, and I see it in the YouTube comments now. People, talking about bankruptcies and financial problems and being laid off, and this old school notion of, well, I'd go out and work at McDonald's if I had to. Well, not if you're a white person in 2025, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. They don't want you down there. You don't fit in, white person. You're going to go fit in at the McDonald's? Yeah, and, I've been to Middle America. I understand there's still towns, there's still isolated areas where, it's going to be enough white folks working at the McDonald's that the culture of the local McDonald's, the person's able to fit in. I'm telling you, in much of the country, and the more populated the local area is, that's less and less of a thing. Wander into a McDonald's, and which I don't, but if I were to wander into a McDonald's here, it's all people who don't look like me, don't think like me, don't talk like me, which is fine. That's great. Me personally, I like diversity. I always have. I don't want to be around a bunch of people like myself. But that's me. That's me choosing that. That's me, having my own preferences. And this idea that, well, it's America, and these are considered undesirable jobs, and then so they're always available. No, they're not. And in fact, I personally knew a McDonald's manager, general manager, and he was a younger guy. I think he was younger than me. One of these real go-getter types. And I know I've told this on here before, but we were talking, he had a brain. Like, the guy read, he understood economics to some extent. And this was when I was studying the financial system on the heels of 08, 09. So this would have been probably 2010, somewhere in there. And we were talking about this notion of, well, you can always go work at McDonald's. And he was like, yeah, no, you can't. He said, these people aren't quitting these jobs. He said, as soon as the economics go backwards and people start feeling squeezed, the first thing they do is they don't leave their job for an uncertain situation. So whoever was working at McDonald's that may have been said, okay, well, I can go to this other place and make $1 more an hour, that shit stops, right? That shit's over with, because it's like, yeah, they're not going to go from a guaranteed situation, or maybe they're now going to take a second part-time job if they're able to. They're not giving up the whatever. If back then, if McDonald's was still willing to give them 40 hours, they're taking the fucking 40 hours. They're not quitting. Okay. And over time, a place like McDonald's is going to cycle through the riffraff. See, part of why they're always hiring is because the people who are competent and willing to work for less than what their actual value should represent to these markets, that it should represent to a free labor market, they're not retainable in the long run to a McDonald's. See, so McDonald's has no choice but to cycle through the riffraff in a certain economic climate. Economic climate changes. Now McDonald's has access to competent labor that it can hang on to, and no more cycling through the riffraff. But the indoctrinated American is like, well, I'd go straight to McDonald's, and I'd work there as long as I had to do whatever I had to do. Okay, but what's plan B, boomer, when you go to the McDonald's and they won't hire you during uncertain economic times? What happens when, boomer, you go to Burger King and they won't hire you due to uncertain economic times? Because they can pick from who's applying. Because what Gen Z understands that boomers don't understand is that getting a job now has a lot to do with the culture and environment of the workplace. And this has always existed to some extent. When I remember how well I've interviewed as a young person, there were some jobs that I probably got because the interviewer understood that I wouldn't be a good fit. And that's what good fit means. Are you going to get along with these people? And are they going to like to be there? Right. And that's, from the management's perspective, that's a big part of a workplace is, do all of these people work together as a team? Do they like each other? Right. Can they get along? So haughty, entitled boomer, as much as haughty, entitled boomer has internalized notions around hard work and is willing to bust their ass and work their fingers to the bone, perhaps flipping burgers. Well, who cares if, we got to be treated to the rest of the personality? Okay. Meanwhile, half the McDonald's is speaking to each other in Spanish, and may tolerate the boomer, may not tolerate the boomer, right? Probably will tolerate the boomer. It's what's the management going to think about that? And when the management has 30 people right now who are willing to fill one slot, well, what's going to be the determining factor? It's not going to be, well, I am boomer, hear me roar. My life is through a series of unfortunate events. I now need to go back into the workforce at age 65. Not me, but, boomer. It's boomer time at the McDonald's. And then boomer showing up as if they're God's gift to McDonald's. Right. Are you crazy? Yeah, they are. They're crazy. These are crazy people in the YouTube comments. These are crazy people on whatever these social media platforms are that I'm not on. The boomer, they are crazy people. They are still living in the world that they grew up in. It's not here anymore. And they grew up in a world where anybody could go work, pretty much anybody could just go work at McDonald's. Remember that Alexander Supertramp famously, working at Christopher McCandless from Into the Wild, right? Uh, part of his story was, for a time, to save up money to go to Alaska, he worked at McDonald's, and his thing was he didn't want to wear shoes, apparently. So it was like, oh, everybody loved him at the McDonald's, but they kept having to remind him to wear socks and shoes, or whatever that was. Oh, look at him, he's so irreverent. Um, but it was still the notion of just, so much so that the fella who has to be told to put his socks and shoes on can even work there, right? And that's a very powerful symbol. It's symbolically, that gets burned into people's psyches. Well, no matter if things get bad enough, you can always go work at McDonald's. No, absolutely not. And then what's the criminal background of the average person, right? Are you telling me McDonald's doesn't run background checks? How many people, because of drug addiction, have theft convictions? Do you think McDonald's Corporation or whoever that is, you think the local proprietor of a McDonald's is going to hire somebody with theft convictions and in and out of recovery? Pill heads? Because boomers is pill heads now, right? If I click on a video and it's a boomer, we go immediately to 1.5x, and it's like just hoping that makes them speak normally. I've had them up to 2.5x with YouTube Premium. It lets me go past 2.0. I've had some of these boomers on 2.5x, and then, okay, that's a little too fast, and we'll turn them down to some of them sound normal speaking pace at 2.25. Well, what is this? And that's who's in the YouTube comments talking about, well, if it was me, I'd do whatever I had to do. It's like, motherfucker, you can't even speak at a normal pace, and you just go down there and assertively and aggressively dominate the motherfucking McDonald's because they're just immediately going to see how wonderful you are, boomer. Fucking whole generation of narcissists. And again, every generation is equally worthless, is equally problematic in different ways, right? That's where people misapply this concept of the differences between the generations, is because they would just blast Gen Z as this, it's this worthless generation. Well, then that implies that the boomer generation was awesome and wonderful and just above reproach. See, again, it's back to the narcissism, right? We're great. Boomer generation number one. Look at Gen Z. They can't tell their head from a hole in the ground, and they don't want to work. Right. Or they've been raised by what their millennial parents, propped them up in front of a tablet from day one, and the tablet has instructed them about the fucking bullshit, right? And the corporate hellscape. And meanwhile, boomer is psychologically controlled in a way that, they, at the level of cognitus, they can take in messages around collapse of society and employment and, layoffs and all of this. But the answer is always what? It's they loop into bootstrapping. It's the loop into bootstrapping. Pull oneself up by one's bootstraps where? Externally at the McDonald's, the metaphorical McDonald's. Well, shout out to Millennial Steam, one of my favorite channels. All jobs are McDonald's now. The corporate hellscape has turned virtually all workplaces into some version of a McDonald's, right? Just any low-level job, it's all so corporatized now. And Americans love everything corporate. This idea of, it's the death of Main Street. Look at the mom and pops. Why is my downtown and my local small city hollowed out? It's because Americans prefer everything corporate. And yeah, I'm guilty of that myself as well. But meanwhile, I no longer subscribe to, this place could be reformed and fixed if people just did better. No, it can't. No, it can't. Now, arguably, things would be much different in a way if individuals pulled themselves up, if individuals bootstrapped within themselves and accessed their power inside of themselves. And this is where we get into notions of whatever I titled the stream, something about no external meaning, I think. No power, no meaning externally. None. You, the listener, have no power outside of yourself other than just whatever little bit maybe with the children or the household and whatever, little bit of power at the job. But effectively, generally, broadly overall, let's bring it to a specific context of making the world a better place, which isn't even possible. But the idea of, being the change one wants to see in the world, being productive, toxic positivity, right? Suppression and repression of anything that sounds or seems negative, to perform all of this. And that is the psychological enslavement, or at least part of it, to perform all of this. And then to always bring it back to, there's nothing that can't be hard worked. There's no challenge that it's impossible to hard work one's way through, right? That's the notion. And that's true. But guess where the hard work must be applied? Internally. Guess where the system won't allow people to work to do that? Internally. See? So yeah, hard work is a virtue when it's applied internally for the transformation and the transcendence of the individual. See, the mocking, ridiculing, inverted realm says, oh, hard work's a virtue outside of yourself and in service, to produce in service of this system via an economy, the function of which is to make rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity, and it never fails to achieve its purpose. So yeah, go apply hard work externally, right? And then to equate that with some measure of power, right? And contentment, because the national religion is consumerism at the level of, that's what Americans worship. So again, go out here through the yang form, the masculine form of energy, and assertively and aggressively dominate the McDonald's, boomer, through your hard work. And Gen Z, I've talked to some of these people. I've talked to some of the boomers. I've talked to some of the Gen Z. My own mother, apparently back in the workforce, working with Gen Z probably. And Gen Z, what do you think? Gen Z's just watching these boomers work themselves to death for no advantage, for no extra money, right? A raw deal, slaving away for a corporation, right? And Gen Z's there. Gen Z's getting paid the same amount, right? And then the boomers doing half of Gen Z's job. Well, who's the fool, right? Who's lazy? See, because hard work performed in service of already rich corporations, that can't ever be a virtue. How is it virtuous to make rich people richer? Well, from the perspective of an inverted realm, a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, well, that's perhaps the personification of all morality, is to take one's own human essence and their blood, sweat, and tears and your energies and your time and slave away for a corporation. And to see, oh, looky here, corporate profit, not the size of the corporation. Corporate profits are now growing at twice the rate of the growth of the rest of the economy, right? That means whatever boomer or anybody's doing to toil in the workplace, whatever that growth represents is half of the growth of the corporations. And what does that mean? Where does that corporate profit go? So yeah, some of it goes to people who are not the wealthy elites. Most of it goes to the wealthy elites, so-called, and their administrators. The people, the Klaus Schwabs that work for them. That's who that money goes to. Okay. So tell me again how that's a virtue to do all that. Does that sound virtuous to anybody? How could any of that ever be misconstrued as virtuous? Well, again, in an inverted realm, it's probably the opposite. It's probably actually to curse one's blessing, to go out here and put one's own gifts and talents and blessings, and to see that subverted into making rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity. That's a violation. That's a curse. That's to curse one's own blessing, blasphemy in the Holy Spirit, the so-called only unforgivable sin, right? Again, what would Jesus do / what would Jesus not do? Pretty sure Jesus would not have had the option, where he here probably would not even have the option spiritually of slaving away for a corporation to make rich people richer. Probably wouldn't spiritually be capable of it. Oh, but his people who are his followers, that's what they do. The people in 2025 who believe themselves to be his followers, that's what they do. Because if they don't go out and produce for corporations and in businesses to make rich people richer, or to make affluent people who are trying to become wealthy enough to have a seat at the table or to sell their businesses, for enough money to cash out and go, what? To go kick it and do the opposite of hard work, to lay about and to not produce for society. So I must produce for society, but if I'm intelligent enough to come up with some sort of business, and then if I work hard in that business to some extent, and then everything goes right, and through my own network of connections and being in the right place at the right time and all of this, well, what if eventually the corporation becomes such that I sell the corporation and I cash out with $1 billion liquid? Well, now I get to go kick it, because that is economic stimulus. Because what is a billionaire going to go do? Well, that's what the economy's been retooled to serve. I don't know if folks have noticed. The economy is still promoted as doing well at the level of consumption and at the level of profit. And then meanwhile, us common folk are looking around like, what are you talking about? How could this ever be a good economy? It's great for the people who have $1 billion liquid, or 300 million liquid, or 500 million liquid, right? Now, if it's liquid, meaning they probably already have a house, they probably already have property, they probably already have, lawyers and accountants. That's what I mean is that's just what they're able to spend if they choose to, right? 300 million, 500 million, $1 billion. But now it's okay for them to go kick it. Why? Meaning they can hang out at their place on the, if they're on the West Coast, hang out in the Bay, hang out, in LA, wherever they want to hang out. And do you think they give a flying fuck if they open their phone? Oh, I'm a little hungry. I had a busy day. I didn't eat my, at the normal time. Well, I don't really want to go anywhere. Pull up their app. Oh, look, $40 to have a burrito delivered. Who cares? Doesn't matter what the burrito costs. See, all they know is, they know that this local place has quality food. They open their Uber Eats app, and do you think they give a flying fuck when they see that it's a $40 burrito? And this is not hyperbole. With tip, it's $38 apparently in Seattle. Now I'm sure that's on the high side, but would it be possible to have one delivered for less than $25 then? Probably not, right? But that's who the economy's for. That's who consumption is for. That's what Klaus Schwab is talking about, right? The proletariat. It's like, no, you're just going to have the leftovers, proletariat. And in fact, it's probably always been the leftovers for the proletariat, the masses, the underclass, right? It was that when it suited the system, it seemed like the consumption was worth it, right? Oh, we've got, when I remember my childhood into my teenage years, all of the awesome, what seemed awesome at the level of pop culture, all of these movies and the merchandising, all of these movie franchises. I'm out here walking around and it's billboards for another Naked Gun movie. It's like, what is this? Is there just no more creativity anymore? So all of these things being birthed, back in my youth. I was a child. It seemed awesome and wonderful. It was what it represented was some version of that Pleasure Island from Pinocchio. It was of this realm. It was vacuous, delusory, adversarial, and serving a system of business transactions. And in fact, setting up the future of business transactions and all of this in 2025, so much so that Klaus Schwab knows what he means when he says you will own nothing and you will be happy. It's life as subscription services. That's what it is, meaning to be born into further slavery, right? And what are we seeing now? And what we're seeing now is, there's simply no end to what the American public, there's no end to what they will accept and tolerate from the powers that be in the systems. There's simply no end. And part of the psychological programming is to think, okay, well, the shit's about to hit the fan, the economy's about to collapse, things are about to get bad. No, those are all of the reasons why the system maintains itself in a state of collapse. That's a perpetual, it's always that way, whether people see it that way or it appears that way or not, it's always that way. See? So it's to be further psychologically enslaved to this. And then so it's the combining of the Orwell and the Huxley, to some extent. We've already seen that. And then the technology side of it, making it even more, possible to do these things, to where when the person, you know, leaves their mother in a state of spiritual perfection, it's immediately handed off, and the system does with it what it does for the purposes of the system. And part of that is going to be further, uh, even more powerful and deeply entrenched psychological control, where it will just more or less be dictated to the individual. This is what the individual does on a day in, day out basis to produce, and to then have those credits hit the account, and then just life is set up to debit their account, right? So just anything they do involves credits and debiting of the account, crediting the account, debiting the account. And that is the so-called social credit score on some level also. So it won't be so much, and it won't be, and it's not so much the prescribing of the behaviors and the belief systems and all of this, so much as it won't be possible to not participate. Again, another inversion. It will simply be impossible to not participate. And that does seem to be some version of what, Neo from the Matrix was dealing with, when Morpheus first found him, was that it was still possible in some ways. Neo was sort of hacking and doing these other things, but he seemingly, more or less had no choice but to work, to use his skills, in service of corporations, in that, dystopian world of the movie The Matrix. You know, and folks, this is here, and it's going to continue. So again, the idea of bringing children into this world, and then especially when the parents understand it on some level, and this probably does actually relates to the gospel of Jesus, and the idea of Thomas Merton saying, Satan or antithesis is happy to preach the gospel of Jesus as long as Satan or antithesis is able to preach it in his own way. Same thing from the system. The system, is happy to preach these ideas that I'm talking about as long as it can preach it in its own way, right? And connect it to notions of the greater good, and being productive, and, doing one's part, and not wanting to be a burden, and realizing that the boomers have really been psychologically controlled around notions of not wanting to be a burden. And my own father, said this to me at a certain point in his old age. This would have been around the time I was, the early stages of my chronic illnesses, maybe 4 or 5 years, whenever this was. I'm bad at tracking the time. 3 or 5 years ago, whenever this was. And I don't remember the context, but I remember him saying, well, I was more or less like, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? And I'm not that questioning of a person overall. I tend to not get in people's affairs. So he must have brought it up. And, and at a certain point, he's like, well, I don't want to be a burden. Right. And I just looked at him. I said, when have you ever been a burden to anybody? Like, what are you talking about, bro? What, huh? Like, when have you ever? So that shows programmed obsessively to never be a burden on other people. So I guess probably some version of, realizing that he can no longer pay for his own retirement, and then maybe, having at some point to be some version of, a burden on society, perhaps, as he ages and goes into his elder, is just helpless at a certain point, from being an old person. And I'm like, when have you ever been? And what I'm more or less saying to him is, in the short term, you're not going to be a burden, because when have you ever been a burden? And again, here's Benton using logic and reason, and trying to talk logic and reason to my father, who chose to join a mind control cult, lest we forget, in his early 20s, motherfucker joined a mind control cult. If that says anything about this type of person, right? Very, very, very heavily programmed and controlled. Well, that's most of the boomers. That's most of the boomers. So to tie it back to the actual topic, and to attempt to pull myself away from this constantly slicing and dicing and critiquing, and breaking down the system itself, and as much fun as that is, and as interesting as that can be, bring it back to notions of, okay, where is meaning to be found? Where is meaning not to be found? Well, I'm here to tell you, how can there be meaning? how can one find meaning in a vacuous outside of oneself externally? And everything that's not within oneself internally, by definition, is outside of oneself externally. Guess what? Other than what the individual brings into themselves internally to work with, now some of that is negative via fear, guilt, and shame, but other than what the individual consents to bringing into their internal space, society is external to the being. The being does not exist internally um, at the level of meaning and power, other than what I bring into that space and what meaning I find within myself. That's what I mean by no external meaning. But again, the realm itself, so that's actual reality, is that outside of what I know myself to be, which is one with the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, all meaning is contained within that force. Antithesis via delusion, which is this world, is seeking to prove that that's not the case. It's seeking to prove, well, actually meaning can be found outside of that force. No, it cannot. I mean, it's just simply not the way things operate, right? Now, can a mind control slave who's heavily programmed under psychological enslavement, can they perform within delusion as if that was, in fact, a big part of life is a society, and society is external to the individual? And that's where meaning lies. Meaning doesn't lie within you. So if the system can mock and ridicule and program and convince and cajole and coerce the individual into saying, well, there's no meaning to be found inside of me. And if I dare say that there's little to no meaning outside of myself, oh, well, now you're accused of being a nihilist. See, and again, it's an inversion. No, what I am is the meaning. What are you talking about? What I am can never lack meaning. What I am always rises. What I am is the cream that always rises to the top of any measurement of meaning. Always. What I am always supersedes and looks down on other meanings from the level of meaning. See, supreme, most high. Okay, not that I am the consciousness of that force while I'm a human being in a delusion, having these experiences. See, the crazy person, the insane person, is unable to draw those distinctions. See, these are distinctions. It's the idea of you're the cliche of the bumper sticker. You're not I'm not a human being. I'm a spirit having a human experience or whatever. Well, there's, again, all truths are merely half truths within this delusion, apparently, if the Kybalion's to be believed. And I'm not saying that it is, but that's at least some measure of half truth there. Okay. So what is the spirit then? See, and until these things are understood, until the meaning of all of this is decoded within oneself, what good is any of it? It's only ever capable of serving the system externally. Until what? The meaning must be discovered. The meaning must be, in order for the individual to transcend these limitations, and certainly the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, having been allowed to, having been able to, bring about a state of forgetfulness on the part of the spiritually perfected being, leaving their mother in that state of spiritual perfection. Again, John 14:26, referring to bringing these things unto your remembrance, to remember. And this happened to me many years ago, realizing at a certain point, oh, all these spiritual practices and spiritual growth and all of these, processes, this is, I'm merely trying to get back to where I started in this game, right? This game of lies, world of death. I'm just trying to go back to where I came from in the first place, which is some acknowledgement that, oh, I've had the thing the whole time and just wasn't aware of it. And in fact, still wasn't aware of it fully until maybe 6 months ago. And that's what's going on here. And it has nothing to do with Benton. It It has nothing to do with Benton's performance. It has nothing to do with the tone of Benton's voice. It has nothing to do with the aspects of Benton's performance or presentment that could be and is ridiculed and mocked, because if Benton were never here, everything would still be almost exactly the same. So that proves at the level of logic and reason, as I proved with logic and reason to my father, that proves at the level of logic and reason, Benton can never be the problem. But Benton is always the problem for the perspective of this system, because what Benton knows himself to be and what the system understands that Benton may come to understand that he represents this most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency, whether he knows it or not. See, that's another secret. That's another secret, is that this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. If each individual in this realm leaves their mama and is possessed of Nancy Pelosi's MS-13 spark of divinity, that means every individual represents that force, whether it knows it or not. And Moloch's machine, again, undertaking to where antithesis or Satan would be able to pause the simulation, the computer simulation. Again, and I'm going to keep repeating this, it's the within the delusion that time and space and place could even exist in actual reality, which is not possible. That's not possible in actual reality for this place to, strictly speaking, exist exactly as presented. That's why elements of waking dreams, surrealistic unreality must always be present. They have to be present. And that proves that what this is can never represent true actual reality. So recognizing that based on, as defined, each new moment, now it's here, now it's gone, now it's here, now it's gone, that the computer simulation aspect is to catalog and measure in each new moment the creative force of the individual, as defined earlier, just prior, is to have this creative force that always gives birth to something new. It's never not creating, it's never not giving birth to something new in each new moment. And again, based on the delusion that that's even possible to have a now and a time and a space and a place, it's to measure that discrete output, because whatever is being created in each new moment either serves the proposition and the what I am, or it serves the antithesis of the proposition, and there's no middle ground. And so antithesis, or Satan, waiting for the moment to pause the game and then say, hey, none of these lights, all of these individual representations of the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible within this game of lies, world of death, none of them are living and choosing and operating based on what thesis or proposition purports itself to be. Therefore, in some version of a courtroom scene from the movie Devil's Advocate, now you have, Al Pacino as prosecutor making his case that, in fact, antithesis having accused via Moloch's machine in this place, the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, gathering evidence to make the legalese court case for why, well, in fact, antithesis, the powers, whatever forces of evil, Al Pacino's character would have represented in that movie. And I haven't actually watched the movie. I've seen scenes here and there, so I'm abstractly extrapolating. I don't need to have seen the entire movie. So here's where people may not understand. If there's a scene in the movie later that contradicts what I'm asserting, that has nothing to do with my assertions, because I'm abstractly taking one portion of a larger movie and I'm making a point with it. And that's where a lot of this Book of Job stuff has been confused. And it's not even confused. It's used to mock and ridicule. No, I've abstractly taken portions of the story of the Book of Job. Right. And I made that clear, or I thought I did. But funny how the context is removed. Silly little human style. And that's what's happening here, like it or not. And then, so many in the low state of development, the human says, well, I don't want things to be that way. Well, that's how a child thinks. Or I don't like the way it feels to face. Yeah, that's a child is concerned about how they feel about the reality. Remember the pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The ancestors, a lot of their teachings weren't around, being hardened and weathered and being able to weather the storms of life. right? And isn't that a lot about, doesn't really matter what you prefer, doesn't really matter what you think, because we have to go out here and pick this cotton or whatever, you know, we must go out here and do this. And however the individual feels about it is beside the point. Well, as we know, because of marketing and advertising and the consumer society and the obsession with worshiping the national religion, the god of consuming, the god of consumption, well, now the individuals have had so much smoke blown up their ass about how great they are, so that they'll buy ever more products and services and engage with ever more brands. And see now, and part of the psychological control is when Benton introduced these concepts, the immediate reaction is, well, I don't like how that feels. Well, I don't prefer that. I prefer for it to be a different way. Well, who cares? That's not that way. That's, again, it's very childish and immature. See, it's childish and immature to approach it that way. Well, what about me? What about me? What about me? Yeah, what about you? You were born if you are what I am, you were born you were born spiritually perfected into a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transaction that makes itself an enemy of what you represent, and is in fact in the process of perhaps disproving the validity and authority of what you are at your core essence from day one, and it attacks every moment of your life. And it got to design your psychology. It got to install your psychology. It got to mind control you. It was able to do all of these things to prove for its own purposes, to your detriment. And then you're concerned about how you feel about that. And because you're entitled, see. And I don't mean you, the listener, my apologies. Let me back up. The boomer's entitled, see. The millennial's entitled. Everybody's out here entitled and spoiled rotten, see. Because remember, Benton maintains himself. Benton, other than when Benton was quite ill for, a series of years consecutively recently, in the not too distant past, Benton has maintained himself at the state of being able to do a day's work and sleep in a ditch. And at least, if it's possible, to earn enough money to eat and buy some garments, right? And maybe a backpack. And if he's lucky, maybe some nutritional supplements, and go sleep in a metaphorical ditch somewhere, until somebody has, you want to work, okay, and I'm not going to brag. I just want to tell it like it is. See, none of this was accidental. So let me take a breath and calm down. And this is not that I'm better and you're not. And everybody has their own story. But part of Benton's story was Portland, Oregon, got a week's worth of day labor. So showed up early in the morning to the MLK Workers Center in downtown, lottery system. So if I'm gonna get work at least one day, I probably need to go every single day of the week. Okay, get my number pulled, wait around to see who shows up to hire me. Okay, and got an entire week's work because there was a shortage of roofers. So this lady who worked at the university or whatever, some smart lady with a high level of education, she just happened to know she needed a roof on her house. Well, everybody's backed up. They're booked up. They can't do it. Right. And this would have been, I don't know, 2016, just guessing. So she just happened to have a really smart coworker. This guy was brilliant. I got to talk to him quite a bit. And he's just like, yeah, I've done a roofing before. So he's like, yeah, fuck it. I'll put a roof on your house. We'll go down to the MLK Worker Center. We'll pick up some unskilled labor. I'll put a roof on your house. Who cares? And so I had a week's worth of work as, unskilled labor on a roof. And I slept in a park about 3.5 miles away. So I woke up having done the day before I walked 3.5 miles with a 35-pound rucksack to a job site in a neighborhood. Okay. I worked all day in the sun, and people say, well, it's Oregon. I say, well, it's hot, man. It's hot in the summer. Yeah, the air temperature 77 degrees. It's still fucking hot. I'm telling you. It's not a subtropical fucking, East Texas or Arkansas or whatever, or Louisiana. Yeah, it's not that, but it's still hot. And, walk 3.5 miles, work all day. At a certain point, Gen Z shows up, and he's only able to work. And it's not and again, this is some of the Gen Z doesn't want to work. Well, Gen Z wasn't capable of working. He showed up, worked an hour or two, and then he just didn't have the focus to do a day's work. And he hadn't been indoctrinated and guilt and tripped and shamed into he has to be there for the, we work till the job's done type shit, which is, again, Benton got some of that programming, right? And so Benton's putting in the day's work, um, which is fine. It was a little confusing that this is some, teenager in the neighborhood or whatever that said he wanted to earn some extra money. And that's some version of mowing yards or whatever. You don't necessarily mow yards all day. It's here and there. Mow some yards, get some fucking money to go play around with. So I guess in his mind, it was like, well, he's worked 2 hours. He's made $40 or whatever. Now he can go, whatever, do whatever $40 would buy in 2016. And so work all day, then walk to wherever I needed to walk to and do whatever I needed to do, as far as eating and buying whatever I needed to buy, only to go, at the end of the day, to go back to the public park, pitch my little camp, go to sleep, and wake up and do it all over again for an entire week, right? And it's not to brag or toot my own horn. Generally speaking, I maintain myself that to be able to do that. And these pilled out boomers can't do that. They're simply not able to do it. A lot of these 50-year-olds, a lot of the Gen X can't do that. And so Benton is unconcerned around, whatever may happen with the government, forcing street people into camps and forcing people into drug treatment. And I'm not, a candidate for that, thankfully, but although in the short term might be better, there would be greater access to resources, actually, believe it or not. But, Benton has nothing to be concerned about, because if the system says, okay, Benton, we're no longer going to let you choose if you work today or not, and we're not going to necessarily let you choose what your job is, and that does seem to be the way things are headed for the people at the bottom, that choice is being removed to some extent, and already has been to some extent. Yeah, I'm able to do it. I have the focus, I have the energy, I have the concentration, and physically, would have to work. If it was a very physical job, it would take me a little time to work up to that, but not too long, and the fact is, again, not to brag, but if you put me up against your average 50-year-old from Arkansas, right, I like my chances. Now, maybe if they're doing hard physical labor every single day, well, probably I'm going to have to catch up to them. But then, what are they doing with their substances? What are they addicted to? What have they got going on in their personal life that's causing them stress and strife, and they're stressed out? See, I'm not concerned. Benton has no concerns around his ability to perform when necessary. Benton's a competitor, right? Born competitor, right? Born to compete in many ways. Yeah. And it's not about Benton. It's about being able to see the way the things are going, see, and the way things are. So day in and day out, what does Benton have to worry about? In worst case scenario, Benton starves to death. I don't know. In at the official fiction layer of being a human being, how many people in the past have supposedly starved to death? I mean, yeah, it would suck, I'm sure, but again, back to Christopher McCandless, he supposedly starved to death, right? And under notions of death ain't much, and what I am will never know death. It has no beginning and has no end. What I'm one with, my true core essence. How can there even be concerns about, oh well, now it just looks like I don't get food, and meanwhile the being, in some ways, Benton prefers that the experience end earlier rather than later in some ways. And yeah, I enjoy, the novelty and the life is interesting and all of this. Sure, I get it, but I've lived my life, folks. Right. So yeah, I understand that it would suck to starve to death, but, is it really, that's preferable to uh, you know, being enslaved by the system, further enslaved by the system or to the system for the purposes of the system. You know, in my world, that's how that works. It's not to, again, to absolve myself of iniquity and wrongdoing by hard work. And that's really what this realm gets a lot of mileage out of. The being, you know, teaching the being that they're lowly, wretched, fallen, sinful, good for nothing, but they can redeem themselves and get right through hard work. Okay. And you know, that almost reminds me of, you know, the Nazi work camps or whatever, you know, something about work shall make you free. Right. Something along those lines. Or work shall set you free. Well, my work has set me free. Benton is set free because of the work he did where? Inside of himself. Why? On behalf of himself for his own purposes. To achieve Benton's goals and perhaps to actually live his purpose, meaning to do what, if Benton was sent here on a mission or for a specific purpose, to have debatably achieved the purpose. See, that's what I mean by I've lived my life, and I've lived the Pinocchio Pleasure Island aspects of my life also. And you know, I have a few people I conversate with, and yes, I know that's not the proper term. The few people I have conversations with, I mentioned yesterday to somebody that, you know, being retired from dating and relationships, because, you know, now that it's everybody's forever young, especially Gen X is forever young, and this person was Gen X, maybe a millennial, but either way, you know, maybe 40, yeah, close enough to my age to perhaps be Gen X, forever young, and it's just sort of assumed that the being will never age out of a desire to be in a relationship, a romantic relationship. And so I'm like, oh, I'm retired from all that. And it's been, again, bad with time. It's been at least 5 years, maybe longer. And I'm talking about no dates, no fucking, you know, nothing, right? Just nothing. And completely satisfied with that. And, you know, and I understand that the language of the internet now involves CEL, cells of various types. And then some may, incel. Well, what do you mean? I was, you know, girls, you know, women my age or females my age started crawling all over me when I was 12 years old. And it took me till 15 to understand, you know, the birds and the bees well enough to actually, you know, to do the thing that makes me never able to be an incel. An incel doesn't have their first experiences at a significantly earlier age than the rest of the peer, you know, than the group generally, right? The group generally would have been like 18, 19, 20, not fucking 15. And it would have been 12, except I was so sheltered that I didn't know what the fuck I didn't understand the opportunity being presented. Just no understanding of what was, literally would have been 12 years old. Okay. An older girl. So that's how you know who's not an incel, if that makes sense. And I've never been called an incel. The point is, I understand, having been on the internet effectively every day since 1994, I understand the internet culture. And again, the idea of Gen X is forever young. Oh, well, now he's going to be accused in some way of incel. What? Because I'm opting out of dating and relationships? Because I've just, that part of my life's over, and why? And that's what I told the guy. I said, why repeat that? I've done that. I did 20 years of that. And well, actually more, but you know, I did 20 years of that as an adult. Like, why do I need to keep doing that? For what purpose? You know? And they're, oh, well, how did that work out for you? Better than most. Got out mostly unscathed. Worked out for me better than most. I assure you. Indeed. What time is it? 6:30. Shoot, it's still early. It's Sunday. Oh man, it's dead, dude. I don't know what the rest of LA's like. The area I'm in is fucking dead. And when I remember, you know, a lot of my memories from being here last year was more really later part of summer. By the time I really got my bearings and everything and got my head right, It was more late summer into the fall and then into the winter. But so I don't have a lot of specific memories of earlier in the summer. But well, it is August now. But it's from what I can recall, this area was way livelier. A lot more was going on. Now, some of it certainly is the activities of the federal government. A lot of folks have just straight up left. It looks like where they've gone, I'm unsure, but maybe some of them self-deported and going to wait for a better time to return, perhaps. But it seems like even the people who have, who are here and working jobs and have apartments and the gentrifiers is what I should say. I'm seeing less of the gentrifiers. Um, there's just less of these people walking through the park. There's less of these people, you know, going and giving money to the street vendors, right? And in fact, yesterday, I was out and about earlier than recent to go do my laundry because the laundromat opens a little earlier on Saturday. I found out, so went and did the laundry yesterday. So and I go up to Sunset. I walk up to Sunset Boulevard, and last year I remember, and it was on the weekend. So this was Saturday night or Friday night rather. So it's, this would have been Saturday morning. So that's the leftovers of the people partying Friday night. So last year, when I was out and about picking up the cans and the bottles at 3 a.m, well, the leftovers from where everybody partied on Sunset was still there. And remember that, well, I don't even want to give too much hints about the location, but there's most places of LA, there's something in the local area that brings in visitors and tourists. So there's a specific thing that goes on in this area that brings in tourists on a regular basis and people who don't live in LA. And, some of that is certainly happening right now. And it was like a ghost town. There was no leftover drunk people, stumbling into Ubers and maybe having a loud conversation at 4 a.m. or whatever. It's just no signs of any of that. And in fact, last year, a lot of times I would be out and about picking up the cans and the bottles, and the street vendors, some of the street vendors were still there, like breaking down their kitchens and, cleaning everything up, right? Because they work as late as the drunk people are willing to come hand them dollars. They're staying until the last person shows up. No signs of any of that. And so things are certainly changing, as they always are. And this is some barometer of what's going on in society. Like, it really is. This is some barometer. But again, back to the notion of, and I never fully fleshed out the point earlier around the point of somebody, working hard and growing their business with a goal of growing it to a size enough where they could be bought out for 250 million, 500 million, a billion, or getting to that level and then saying, okay, fuck it, let's roll the dice. Let's see if we can grow this thing to get a seat at the table with the big boys, to actually become an Amazon or a Walmart or whatever, to just see if that's possible. So it's one or the other, But then also saying, okay, why is it, once they cash out their chips, why is it okay for them not to produce for society? Well, they are still producing for society through consumption. And that is the economy now. The economy is now people with actual affluence who can afford a $200,000 luxury automobile or a $500,000 automobile or a $1 million automobile. So it's counterintuitive because middle America identifies in some part with, well, we like Fords and Chevys or we like, certain brands. Okay. And then of course, to be successful as a car dealer, is to have Ford, Lincoln, Mercury or GM dealerships and chains of dealerships. And we sell these vehicles. And I'm here to tell you that's changed to the way to make money as a car dealer is now to sell high ticket luxury and sports cars. It's a $400,000 Porsche 911 GT3 RS or whatever, $432,000. It's an $8,000 a month car payment if the person who has no problem just, here's $500,000. Just here, take it. Well, maybe they'll choose to finance it or whatever, or get a lease. Oh, $8,000 a month. Who cares? Because remember, to the people who, the affluent, right? Just nothing. $8,000 a month is nothing to them. Doesn't mean anything, right? But the status symbol in a society where the national religion is consumerism, well, to be seen in a $425,000 Porsche. See? And the same thing with the house. The house. What's the house going to cost? 20 million. Well, who cares? We're worth. We got $1 billion in the bank. Who cares? And remember, we may be friends with actual rich people who are tapped into actual rich people networks. And again, the function of the economy is to make rich people richer every new moment into perpetuities, while simultaneously learning how to also become perpetually wealthy every new moment. See, to be able to fit in with those folks. Again, the climbing of the social ladders, the climbing of the hierarchies, in service of what? Because remember, that's all external meaning. See, it's just to seek meaning outside of oneself. And how can that seeking of meaning outside of oneself ever be anything but vacuous? Even the notion of vicariously living through one's children. Well, the word vicarious has a meaning. What does vicarious mean? I don't know. Let's find out. One moment. Vicarious. Vicar. I didn't think about that. Vicar. VICAR. Delegated. Okay. Interesting. Delegated, experienced or gained by taking in another person's experience rather than through firsthand experience. So, how is it a real experience if it's not happening within you? If it's happening via another person, say, or via another entity, or via another mechanism, can that ever represent true meaning? I'm here to say no, it can't. It cannot represent true, actual, substantive meaning. Spiritually, it's not possible. It lacks substance. It lacks soul. So what do we see now in 2025 is many individuals are lamenting the soullessness, and the word vapid is used a lot, but vacuous is actually the proper term. Just how empty and void daily life now seems in America. There's simply nothing there. Well, I'm here to say, if it seems that way, and it in fact is that way, it's always been that way. Are you here to tell me that there was substance and meaning in the past? Where did it go? What happened to cause it to leave? What I'm saying is that I'm using logic and reason and saying, well, if it's not present now, it most likely wasn't present in the past. Now, did people believe it was there? Yeah, some people believe it's here now. Doesn't mean that it is. And I'm talking specifically of meaning to be found externally, vicariously via a delusion, right? So to vicariously seek meaning outside of oneself. And hopefully I didn't get disconnected. I looked down and it was a message telling me to rotate the screen. So I have no idea if that stops the stream or not. So my apologies. Or look, on behalf of others. That's collectivism, right? That's the idea that I'm somehow obligated or beholden to other people. And it's my dad, looking at me fearful and racked with shame at just even imagining being a burden on society, right? Well, that's society's problem. If society views however Benton is performing as a burden, and it undertakes the burden, how's that my problem? Because that's only my problem if there's a proper society that's somehow akin to utopianism, or if it actually was a good society or a proper society. In the context of improper society, in the context of a realm of death and the game of lies, see, when placed in the proper context, this idea that of being entitled. Well, this realm seems to behave as if it's entitled to my very essence. It seems like it behaves as if it's entitled to my production, right? Based on what? Based on what? Well, individuals being mind controlled and tricked and compelled to vicariously live their lives at the level of external meaning. No such fucking thing. Oh, if you're gonna go find meaning in death. Go find meaning in death. So, in some ways, what Benton has transcended and what Benton has been able to do by working with his own power within himself is to transcend and move beyond these limitations, which are self-imposed, whether the being understands that they're self-imposed or not. To move beyond all of this and to recognize, well, the system can believe itself entitled to, you know, whatever it believes itself to be entitled to from me. That doesn't entitle it. Yeah, I understand the master believes itself entitled to the services of the slave in this context, but what happens when eventually the slave can no longer be managed and controlled, and it's a Pyrrhic victory, a war of attrition, to where it's just simply not going to be, the system is not going to be able to use Benton for these purposes anymore, and in fact never really was able to. And again, this idea that, yeah, if Benton was going to make himself something of himself in this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, it would have happened by now. But because I'm 50 and 50's got to be the new 25 or whatever, because I do come across somewhat in a certain type of way, people project onto me, as if I'm going to go apprentice in the trades. Motherfucker, I'm old. Apprentices in the trades are young people, right? But I've had forever young boomers and Gen X's try to talk to me like I'm going to go forever young my way to a goddamn trades apprenticeship. Are you crazy? I'm old. And they're like, no, you're not. Oh, you mean because we can trot a 70-year-old out here who can say, you're still wet behind the ears. He. Like, that's funny. Oh, you just a whippersnapper. And then I say, well, okay. Well, I see the logical form you've created. I'm 50, you're 70, so let me wait here. And I come back with a 90-year-old, and the 90-year-old says, oh, you're just wet behind the ears. Does that make the 70-year-old feel any less old than their 70 years? Do I feel any less old? And I don't feel old, but the point is, what does it matter that we can go find a 70-year-old to tell me that I'm not old? But then I'm going to say to them, okay, wait here. Let me go find a 90-year-old. I'll be right back. Okay, well, now you're not old either. It's laughable. And that's the level society's at. That's the level society operates at. Because Gen X is forever young. And for me, referring to myself as old because I'm 50. See? And then, I'm not hugely proud of this, but it is what it is. I'll tell it. Men and women age differently, right? So at a certain point, when me and ex-wife number 2 were in the process of unwinding, right? What do they call this? Conscious uncoupling. At a certain point, she was sort of feeling herself, because she's attractive, quite attractive. But she was like 42, probably 40, 41, 42, somewhere in there. And that's, like it or not, ladies, that's old. When it comes to a dating marketplace, a sexual marketplace, like it or, yeah, we understand there's attractive 40-year-olds. I get it. Guess what? Still can't compete with an attractive 20-year-old. Sorry. I didn't make it that way. Please don't kill the messenger. Well, and I've ran all the women off anyway. I used to be speaking to a 40% female audience and climbing, but that's over with. It's now effectively 100% male. So I just told her she got to bragging about getting this attention from these 20 and 25-year-olds. And for all I knew, maybe she was dating them. I don't fucking know. Wasn't any of my business. And, this is when I had figured out this idea of possessing another person in the context of a romantic relationship. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. This idea of possessing another person in that context. And, I used to subscribe to those notions. That was my woman. That was my property on some level. Right. And so I'd been able to figure that one the fuck out. Where did I figure it out? Inside of myself, where my power center is. I didn't do it with, now I took aspects of external life and brought them into my internal space and worked with them, sure. But so she's bragging about this, and I just looked at her. I said, "Yeah, but you're old." And that just, and not to insult her, but it's like, yeah, this is not the brag that you think it is, because you're old. Meaning, and part of that was when I was 20, there was no version of me dating. I would never have, wouldn't have been a 40-year-old that would have caught my eye, because I was able to date within my age, which is what whatever 20 to 25-year-old she might have met still prefers a woman his age, right? It's that he's not able to get a woman who's on her level of attractiveness, who's also her age. Guess what? I would have been, conceivably. It was within the realm of possibility. So I'm like, yeah, but you're old, and see that she just didn't think it through. But 42-year-old Benton was pretty close to what, his peak of attractiveness. It's different for males than it is for women. And unfortunately, that peak is never going to end, because society, as it becomes even more vapid, I think would probably be the proper term here, or as society becomes less and less, as society loses what was left of its depth, right? And women and society is now way more into looks, because I'm here to tell you, my looks were not, it was a foot in the door when I was 20 and when I was 25. It was a foot in the door. Now it's just all this attention beamed at Benton for his facial appearance. And I cut my hair short because I was getting chased around the Walmart and chased around the Kroger, right? I'm not exaggerating. And it's not, Benton understands, because Benton, thank God, Benton's father, my whole life, women have just walked right up to my dad and started talking to him. Numerous times I've been with my father in like a grocery store or a public place, and women my own age walk right up to the two of us and start hitting on my father, right? This is just how it is. What's funny? Never bothered me a bit. I actually kind of thought it was funny, right? Never bothered me. Why would it? Why would it bother me? So I understand that there always have been certain men that's their whole life. I've never been that guy. Well, now I am that guy to some extent. And it's because of society is ever more shallow. Society's it's losing whatever little bit of depth it had, right? And again, through the rise of social media and all of these various technologies, the facial structure is now way more important for a male than it ever was in the past. And again, people might say, well, it's because you're in LA. Like, no, absolutely not. I spent a bunch of time in the middle part of the country. That's when my hair was long. I grew my hair out last winter in LA, and I wore a fucking beanie, right? No, this was recently in other parts of the country. I cut my hair on purpose so that I could maybe go do my shopping and get out of there without being mobbed. Like, for real. Like, and this doesn't say anything about how awesome Benton is. This says everything about where society is. Okay. And what am I? There's nothing I can do about that. I've given up on trying to shop at the Whole Foods. Not that I shop there, but I have things sent there to the Amazon counter, because Jeff Bezos figured out that Amazon can make a bigger profit if they don't send certain grocery items to Amazon lockers, so that I'll go to an actual Whole Foods and have it sent there, and then maybe I'll spend more money. See, and yes, of course, efficiency and intelligence, right? And it's not Jeff Bezos; it's probably algorithms and various supercomputer systems figuring all of this out, right? Amazon did not compete its way to the top. That's nonsense. That did not happen. It's probably not even possible, right? Can somebody? It doesn't even matter. I don't even want to get back into it, but that's what we're talking about here. And so, to me, I'm horrified by this, because I know that it ain't me, right? It's not how great I am, right? Because It's just, that's not what it is. This is just fucking weird and bizarre. Now, you can look at the neurodivergence and the undiagnosed fake autism. Yeah, I'm way more sensitive to this stuff than other people are. And I'm, when I go in the store, it's not connected to socializing. It's not connected to, well, maybe there's an opportunity to meet a stranger. No, I'm on a mission. I'm a man on a mission. I'm there to get whatever I need to get and get the fuck out. Right. I'm not there to, maybe I'll bump into somebody. Right. That's not the purpose. If I wanted to do that, I would still go in man on a mission style. And then I would come back later if I wanted to peruse and maybe be open to meeting a stranger. And then again, logic and reason. I've said out loud in a Walmart supercenter in Hope, Arkansas, I've just said, rhetorically to whoever might be listening, just if some version of, if I was in the market, I would not be on the market. Meaning if I was open to these sorts of interactions from these women, 3 women chasing me around the Walmart simultaneously, if I was open to this, I would not be available. And this is why do so many ladies end up now with Chad? Chad's, dating 10 different women that he's banging. It's because they go to the grocery store and follow Chad around the motherfucking grocery store. That's why. So I'm making the point that, hey, in the past, I've, strayed here and there, sure, but I wasn't seeing 10 women at a time, and, maybe I could, maybe I couldn't, who knows? But a recognition of, historically, I've been a one woman type of guy, or at least one at a time. And if I was open to these advances that are becoming ever more aggressive from these women, back in my day, it was a lot more subtle and sort of below the radar and indirect. Now it's becoming more aggressive. Again, aggression, assertion, dominance, right? Everything through the Yang form. But this is a sign of a profoundly ill society, right? And just not recognizing, like, hey, if, in Hope, Arkansas, the last of the 3 that really, it was like, wow, this woman something's wrong, because she's pretty fucking hot, like conventionally attractive in Arkansas. Like, this is an Arkansas 10, right? This was an Arkansas 10, okay, which is maybe an 8, okay, on the overall scale. And why is she's fucking staring me down? She's moving her basket around, pretending to look at the fucking fruits and vegetables, but she's looking at me, right? And so are these other 2 broads. And what the fuck is this? And this is bad, because this Arkansas 10 should not be in here looking for men at the supercenter, right? Like, something's gone wrong. Well, if she lives in that area, probably anybody who maybe could have conceivably, and she's probably about 35, gotten to her age and still be, have all his hair, all his teeth, and be in good physical shape, and not be addicted to drugs, and be capable of showing up and being employable, and having a brain between his ears, right? And having testosterone. That's a lot of boxes to check, and being conventionally handsome, at least, debatably conventionally handsome. That's a lot of boxes to check. See? So back in the olden days, she was attractive enough that she always would have had access to a husband or a boyfriend. Not now. Not who checks all those boxes. Absolutely not. So now I see true crime cases coming out of Arkansas. There's a true crime channel that dude's from Jonesboro, Arkansas, and he covers a lot of stuff coming out of, that's a slightly different part of the state than where I'm from, but not really. It's actually, it's the same area, I guess culturally you'd say. So that's quite close to Memphis, Tennessee. So it is similar to where I'm from, where I grew up. Just not quite the concentration of black folks, but it's in the Delta, right? Delta region. And so it's sad, but these women that are my age, or maybe 40 or 35, they end up dating these just complete loser pieces of garbage, some of which end up, murking the lady, right? And this last one, this dude was, you could tell, was just a piece of garbage, right? But he, again, being from Arkansas, was actually, they still made them become, they still make them become men to some extent, right? He probably knew a trade, you know, he looking at his picture, he was masculine, but certainly you could just tell based on the story that this is not a handsome guy who's conventionally attractive and charming, right? This is more like a diabolical, manipulative drug addict who knows how to use people. And he was, in the story of this crime that he eventually got convicted of, this guy had like multiple women between like the ages of 35 and 50 that he was seeing, right? So make no mistake, if you think, oh, Benton couldn't do that, but it is an option if I wasn't who I am and if I hadn't grown and changed and evolved to be the person and probably I've never had it in me to actually do that. But I know my father, that's what he's done, is, not date a bunch of women at once, but he's been sponging off of women since he was about my age, using their desire to the fact that they want a man, because it's like, oh, well, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Yeah, that's true. It's worse. They want a man. That's worse for them. And I feel bad for these ladies with these scumbags that are in their life. But guess what? I'm shopping at the Walmart. I'm not the solution, ladies. I'm just trying to shop and get the fuck out of here. I'm not the solution to any of this, right? And in fact, I'm proving myself to be a good person in some way that, no, I won't have anything to do with you, ladies. It's that these scumbag, manipulative, criminal, he was a convicted felon already. These convicted felon drug addicts is all that's left for them. And I feel bad for them. Meanwhile, ex-wife number 2, again, during the unconscious coupling, when she started dating, right? And I saw who she was dating. Because remember, I'd pop back up on the scene here and there. It was an on again, off again there for the last couple of years. And I finally just had to tell her, I saw these losers she was meeting. I said, listen, I said, there's no reason for you to ever date a person who has a criminal felony background or who has been or is in recovery, right? At a certain point, she was seeing this guy who was supposedly recovered or in recovery for substances, but he thought he could drink. So he was drinking. I was like, look, I said, just no more, just knock it off with just nobody in recovery. If they've been in recovery or they're in, there's no reason. There's guys out there who are not felons who are not in recovery, right? But then all the woman is seeing is the attractiveness and the pursuit. He's pursuing her. And yeah, he's fucked up. Of course he's drunk. Of course he's pursuing you. And then meanwhile, the guys who are actually living righteously, if they are, but the guys who are seemingly living correctly, well, they may not have the nerve to go up and talk to her, right? Or they're not looking for a woman to use up and toss aside, right? And so who do these women end up with? Those type of fellas. And sometimes they get murked as a result. This is just sad. It's sick. And society is sick. Why would I ever want to externally go out here into society and be productive? And why would I ever want to support any of this? Well, it's all under the notions of, well, and as soon as Benton starts talking about the problems, well, what's your solution? Well, what do you mean? What I am is the solution. What's my solution? Huh? Like, I don't even understand what they mean. Like, I know what they mean, but it's like, I can't stand under their understanding of that. Like, I can't stand under what they think they mean when they ask me for, because really it's like, well, this is all we have. This is the best, more or less, this is the best society's capable of. And what I say is, if this is the best society is capable of, individuals must do better. So that's my solution. And how am I proving that to be a solution? Well, I went ahead and did it. Guess what? I went ahead and did it. Now, the work is not completed. Certainly show me a human, I'll show you a hypocrite. That includes me. Yeah, there's many things can be pointed to and say, well, what about this about your behavior? What about that? Yeah, that's fine. I'm saying compared to the average bozo out here who's done absolutely nothing whatsoever to address and resolve whatever's going on individually within themselves, I'm doing pretty fucking good. So say, yeah, that's my solution, is to resolve the internal space and to pull myself up by my bootstraps internally, mind, body, and spirit. And until other people do that, I can't do anything about this place. So fuck you. That's my solution. All right. Now, kiss my metaphorical ass. Right. And here's a middle finger. Now, perhaps we can be friends. See, because that's the levels I operate on. Now, let me go out here as Bobby Fischer and play chess with a bunch of fucking bozos who don't even understand that they blundered out of the gate and they can't ever step to me with this nonsense. So let me humor the other person and make 20 more moves on a chessboard until they finally realize, oh, I can't win this game. I checkmated myself from the first move. This guy's had me in checkmate because he's resolved and continues to resolve what's resolvable within himself and pulling himself up by his bootstraps, mind, body, and spirit, eventually coming to true knowledge of self. See, do the damn thing. What's the point of coming here and not doing the damn thing? Well, I'm here to tell you, there's no external power, right? Effectively, there's no external power that has any meaning or is worth anything, and there's no actual meaning to be found that exists purely externally. It's all internal. It's all internal, right? But then forced into, the externalities are always involved and present at the level of circumstance, right? At the level of circumstance and at the level of performing within within a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. And then it's for the being to internalize all of those understandings and comprehensions. And then when Benton ends the stream at some point in the near future and goes off to his day, Benton takes all of that knowledge and understanding and more into his day, and way more intelligently interfaces with externalities. See, because again, I've talked about the limitations of my understanding. What I'm able to convey through these broadcasts is perhaps 10% of Benton's actual understanding. And then whatever the limitations are of the listener to take it in. So maybe the listener is getting 1% of Benton's understanding here, perhaps. Right. Does that make sense? It's sort of an exponential thing. But Benton, when he goes out into these externalities, is taking all of these, all of this understanding and ability to perform, and the understanding grows by the day, and the ability to properly perform grows by the day. But then they say, okay, well, then this is America. We only everything's a business. We only judge in money. So show us your scoreboard at the level of possessions, at the level of worshiping the national religion of consumerism. Show us how many credits are in your account. Okay, but I'm no count. Y'all forgot. I'm no count since day one. When Benton left his mama, he was no count, meaning from the perspective of this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, I was no count. So we better sign him up to these various accounts. We better get him a social security number. We better set him up with a taxpayer account. We better set him up with an account with the state of Arkansas, a birth certificate. See, we better set him up with all of these things so that he can be taught how to define himself in relation to a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. Well, I'm going forward today based on understanding and comprehending that history. I have the knowledge and comprehension of that history as I take my past, my biography, my experiences, all of my various characteristics, and perform externally to whatever extent Benton performs externally today. See, I've already done the damn thing. This is what I mean by I've lived my life. See, I've already done the damn thing. And so the solution could never be, what about you, Benton? What's your solution? Well, I already did the damn thing. Why are you asking me? Why is the ball in my court? The ball can't be in my court. I'm the motherfucking line judge, or I'm the guy sitting on the fucking that high chair at this point. What do you mean? Huh? I'm looking down on y'all, not you, the listener. I'm looking down on other people saying, well, I've done everything I can do at this point. And until individuals pull themselves up within themselves, which they're not going to do, the vast majority of them, what is there left for Benton to do? Well, again, to be used for the in service of what I am, right? Which is one with the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency. And apparently right now that involves sitting around in the backseat of a Nissan Versa parked on the street in LA, talking to you folks. Apparently, that's what it involves. Okay with me. That's all right by me. Maybe this is all I have to do today. I don't know. It's not up to me. It's not up to Benton and Benton's psychology and how Benton feels about it. And Benton's, that's got nothing to do with any of it. Right. And don't even really know if this is what I'm supposed to be doing today. I don't even know if that's a thing, even if there's something I'm supposed to do. Maybe it just does itself through me. How do I know? I don't know what the day holds. How could I know what the day is going to hold? See, that's, to be open to experience, open to opportunity, open to service, right? But if I must go out here and define myself based on being productive for this system so that I can show off, how many credits are in my account, or what I was able to buy, or where I live, or what type of job I do. Well, if there's not enough time and there's not enough hours in the day to do all of that and do all of these other things that are supposedly more important from the perspective of Christianity, right? Serving the Most High, right? Being some notion of a Christian warrior, or whatever, a good Christian soldier, whatever in the hell that's supposed to mean, right? All religion is demonic, as we know. All religion is demonic, as we know. It's of this realm of death. The nature of all religion is death, because it's of this place. The nature of everything that originates within and by and just everything that is of this place, the so-called world, is dead. That's its nature. Death. The nature of death. Oh, well, let me go out here and define myself in relation to death. All they that hate the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency love death. Yeah. Lovers of death. And it's so when I'm attacked, when Benton is spiritually attacked and mocked and ridiculed, who is doing the attacking? Lovers of death. So, it reminds me of an insult I came up with years ago when some back, especially when I was trying to meet women, and sometimes some of these the unattractive women, would cock block, see me maybe getting the attention of her attractive friend or whatever, and I would just say out loud, "Oh no, an unattractive woman doesn't like me. Whatever shall I do?" Right? It's kind of the same thing. Oh no, lovers of death don't accept me as one of their own. Oh no, what am I going to do now? Right? It's laughable. It's laughable. And meanwhile, to be accepted by lovers of death, this world, to be accepted by the administrators of this world who are lovers of death, how is that ever representative of a victory? How can that ever represent victory? It can't represent victory. Oh, that's right. Benton is set up for effectiveness. Let's go back to effectiveness. Half of being able to operate effectively within this delusion is to avoid everything that will not bear fruit. If it can never be effective, I just don't engage in it. So I just describe various processes that are provably ineffective. See, that's half of effectiveness, is not wasting one moment of time engaging performing in ways that can never bear fruit at the level of effectiveness. See, true intelligence, in other words. True intelligence, in other words. All right, I guess I'll wrap up on this. These hikers that got murked in Arkansas, in Devil's Den State Park. If people have heard about this case, people may not be aware of that that's in Arkansas, and that I'm not that familiar with the park itself. I'm pretty sure I went there with my family maybe at some point, and I lived in Northwest. That's in Northwest Arkansas. It's in the southern portion of what's considered Northwest Arkansas. And Northwest Arkansas is where Walmart is headquartered, if anybody's curious. It's much different than the rest of Arkansas. But I went to college. They caught the fella in Springdale, which is the University of Arkansas is in Fayetteville. And if one drives north out of Fayetteville, they leave Fayetteville and immediately enter Springdale if they're on, the interstate or the main road. Goes to Springdale. It is possible to leave Fayetteville to the north and go to Johnson, but that's a different small town. Springdale's bigger than Fayetteville, I believe, although that may have changed. Northwest Arkansas being a collection of like smaller cities that all kind of grew into one thing. And in fact, that I met my first wife there. We lived there, for the entirety of our relationship. So I lived there about 10 years overall, and from freshman year to my late 20s, I guess. And so I'm certain I've been to Devil's Den State Park at some point. And but I've driven past it many times. It's just off of Highway 71, which used to be the main highway if one was going to Northwest Arkansas and there was not yet an interstate bypass. And so now it's deserted. Now Highway 71 is like a deserted ghost town because it parallels what used to be I-540 is now Interstate 49 in Arkansas. And I've driven through that area quite a bit. And that's near West Fork, Arkansas. And I can tell you I can tell you what's what's there business wise or what was there. So again, familiar with the general area. So that's been kind of interesting. And then also realizing when they caught this fellow, he was getting his hair cut by a Latin woman who had like 5 names, right? And then, remembering what the federal government is doing here in LA and all these big cities rounding people up. But interestingly, they're not doing it in Springdale, Arkansas, because certainly this woman had no fear of when the popo showed up and was like trying to figure out whose car that was so they could arrest this dude, the dude's hair she was cutting. She's not in danger of being deported. Well, as we know, what corporation has its headquarters in Springdale, Arkansas? Does anybody know off the top of your head? And if you think you know something about economy and business and corporations, well, it's the world's largest meat producer, or what was the world's largest meat producer, Tyson Foods, headquartered Springdale, Arkansas, and it's always been in Springdale, Arkansas. And so, how did Tyson Foods become one of the largest corporations in the world? It did it with migrant labor. It did it with illegals. See, so the culture when I went to college in '93, Arkansas did not have that many Hispanic folks, but even back then, Northwest Arkansas had already developed a culture of Hispanics come here and work in the chicken processing plants, right? And maybe some of them become chicken farmers, for the sharecropper version of chickens, where Tyson Food owns, the chickens, and they, drop off the baby birds, and then the sharecropper or whatever, he owns the land and is like an independent contractor, and then he raises the birds, and then Tyson shows up and throws the birds on their trucks at a certain point and takes them off to the processing plants. That was already happening in '93, folks. And some of them were brought legally, some of them were brought illegally, right? And then I remember, because I read the newspaper every day going back to the '80s, there were some raids. Tyson Foods did used to get raided at some point. There were these where they'd go in and raid the facilities, but not anymore. They don't raid Springdale. They don't raid Tyson Foods anymore. Tyson Foods got too big. See, and now maybe it is happening, but it's not happening in a way that would actually harm Tyson Foods. And then what did Tyson Foods have to agree to give the government or the powers that be? So eventually Tyson Foods is like, hey man, we're trying to operate our plants here. Like, what do y'all need to knock it the fuck off with, shutting down our operations? And then the government is like, okay, well, Tyson Foods has been resistant to, maybe in the past they've been resistant to certain government programs, that certain things the government wanted them to participate in, right? So maybe that's some sort of way of getting Tyson Foods to play ball. Meanwhile, what happened during the pandemic? Tyson Foods achieved 99% jab compliance from their workforce, including their own fleet they have their own truck driving fleet. They have Tyson Foods truck drivers that work directly for Tyson Foods. And those jobs are seen as so desirable. Those drivers went and got jabbed. A lot of them didn't want to. See, but so that's Tyson Foods playing ball. Tyson Foods has already proven, well, we're Tyson Foods. We'll play ball with whatever the government wants, so that the government doesn't shut us down, so that we can keep bringing in people who will work under bad conditions for less pay than an American will. That's the American dream. That's America. That's your country. Has been doing that since at least the '90s, and probably been doing it far earlier. So now you're going to tell me 2025 is 2025 and people are going to want to know what my solution is? I don't know, go read your Kaczynski and then come back and tell me what my solution would be. Go read your Kaczynski and tell me what my solution would be. Oh, well, nobody would. Why bother to actually read Kaczynski? See, and maybe I'll just read Kaczynski. Maybe that'll be the future streams. I don't know. Maybe I'll just sit here and read from Kaczynski. I've done it before, actually. People enjoyed it to some extent. Pardon me, not that it will change anything, but I'm trying to see if there's anything else I need to cover. See, that's been a bit surreal. And that was a school teacher. See, the lesson of this, back to the Devil's Den thing, and people tripping out on the name Devil's Den, but some of it is like almost like something out of one of my favorite movies, Natural Born Killers. It's like this, almost like also like A Clockwork Orange, this ultra violence, and just sort of this, younger men sort of rampaging and just, I don't even know what's going on at that level, but, and these things have always happened to some extent, I'm sure, but he's a school teacher, and this shows you, and on the last stream, I read from an article talking about how apparently the system claims that Canada is looting the medical professionals and bringing them to Canada as much as possible. And I'm sure some version of that's always happened, but people are apparently interested in going and getting the fuck out of this place. But then in the, the idea from the perspective of the news article is, well, now America's going to have even less of a quality healthcare system, perhaps. But then looking at the quality of education, and apparently this guy is from Oklahoma, I believe, if I read that right. I think that's the case, and I may be wrong on that, but he at least had worked as a teacher in Oklahoma, and somebody pointing out that they're 50, apparently dead last in education, and then now here he is able to continue to get hired as a school teacher, even though there's been incidences and there's been problems in the past, right? And now here he was going to start working in Springdale, which by Arkansas standards, supposedly there's some really good school districts in Springdale. And, I don't know which school district he was going to work for, but, and then just people are saying, oh, he looks so evil, and a few people actually figuring out like, wow, how did this guy even get hired as a school teacher? Well, this is on purpose. This is who the system wants teaching your kids. Like, for real. This is the type of people the system, and this is the type of people the administrators who do the hiring, this is the type of people they are. Like, for real. They're these type of people. This is who's in charge of everything in America, is these creepy, fucking evil lovers of death weirdos. That's who's running your country, folks. And this is what I mean by there's no end to what the American people will tolerate. People just go along with it. That people are going to continue to go along with it. At what point is one of these teachers going to be the ones, why even, if this is who can be hired to teach us, if this is who can be hired to teach elementary education, well, school shooters are out of business. School shooters we don't even need a school shooter now. If this is who we can hire as a teacher, this is like if the system was able to, mind control, and it probably is. This is Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold as your child's fucking fourth grade teacher. This is Eric Harris and or Dylan Klebold teaching your child's fourth grade class. No hyperbole. This is Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold as your child's fourth grade teacher. This would have been unimaginable when I was in fourth grade. This would have been unimaginable when my nephews and nieces were in fourth grade. And in 2025, it's like, yeah, of course, some version of Eric Harris or Dylan Klebold or, name anybody you want to name at the level of an atrocity that happened in a school. Now they're in the school. Now we don't even need a school shooter now. Now they're there. They're in, the system itself has put them in place, or is putting them in place. For reals, folks. And guess what? What do Americans do? Tolerate it, just like they tolerate everything else. That's why America is not a respectable country. That's why Americans are not respectable people. The American people is not a respectable populace, right? A respectable populace doesn't hire some version of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold to teach fourth grade. See? And none of this is a bug. This is a feature. This is not a proper society that's somehow fallen on hard times. And now some version of Eric Harris or Dylan Klebold is able to get a job teaching fourth grade or whatever. This is not that. This is the system via the further degeneration of the individuals who comprise the masses. This is from the perspective of the system has finally advanced or progressed to the point where the populace will tolerate Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold as school teachers. So ask me again, what's my solution? My solution is that individuals go within themselves, do better, bring themselves up by their bootstraps inside of themselves, mind, body, and spirit, such that there's no possibility at some point in the future of society creating Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold and whatever this recent school teacher criminal psychopath is or was. Thanks for watching. Bye.